Hello? Baby?
This is the story that very true. Let's get that out there. There's historical documents out there. You can go and research for yourself. There's actually been a movie out there produced, pretty well-known movie. If you've ever seen National Treasure, Book of Secrets, what we're going to talk about, the truth in this story, a part of it was in that movie. So my introduction to this, I was born in South Philadelphia, right? So when we moved here, we lived on the corner of Montezuma and Alta Vista. That is in South Phoenix for those that don't know. So I'm gonna paint the picture for you. We lived on the northeast corner. My grandmother moved out here first, purchased the house. My mom came out here in '85. My Jerry was already here. A lot of my family was already here. I think we were the last to leave Philadelphia. Living in South Phoenix, I remember being that young because it was such a shock. It was completely different. I remember the difference in living right away. Here in Phoenix, Arizona, we had alleys, there was space, fences with yards. It was completely different. It was dirt. It was a lot of dirt. It was dusty. My mom put me into this school called St. Catherine. St. Catherine was about 4 blocks away. It was on Central and Alta Vista. I went to St. Catherine, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Right around the 3rd grade, my mother became displeased with something at the school. So one day in 1987, she decides to take me to this new church called St. Francis of Xavier. Now, this new church is on the other side of town, but we only had to take one bus to get there. That was the Central bus. But that bus would take us from South Phoenix all the way to North Phoenix where St. Francis was. So we decide to go to St. Francis of Xavier. While we're there, she has this meeting. Now I know what the meeting was about. It was about the school, but also it was about the church. She wanted me to have, a school that had a church attached to it. That was huge. It was all on the same property. And if you know anything about St. Francis of Xavier, Brophy Prep and Xavier, you're on this massive campus. It's a very beautiful campus if you've never been there. My mom's having this meeting and I'm just there. The priest can see who I am. I don't know why I was really, but I was there and I'm glad I went. While my mom is talking to the priest, I'm just kind of looking around, and I was an adventurous kid. While my mom and the priest are talking, I'm just kind of being nosy. As I'm doing this, I make my way into a back office. While I'm in this back office, I come across these stone crosses. Now, these stone crosses, they were on a stand roughly about 4 to 5 feet tall, almost like a pillar or an altar, so to say. The stone crosses had wording that I was not able to read. So Indiana Jones was huge at the time. My excitement drew the priest and my mother into the office and room that I was at. Turns the light on, and he goes to explain to me what it was that I was looking at. He pretty much tells me that these crosses, 2 crosses, they lead to treasure. I think this was the deciding factor for my mom, because after the 3rd grade, I began attending St. Francis of Xavier. One day, and the reason why I remember this so vividly, we're going to fast forward about 2 to 3 years. I'm at St. Francis of Xavier, the actual school. This was 4th or 5th grade. The reason why I remember this is because there was this snowstorm. And we're talking about Phoenix, Arizona. We're talking about the desert, right? It's hot. It rains, but it never snows. And this day, it was weird because not only was it snowing, the snow flakes were so massive. I remember this like I said, like it was yesterday, right? And this was the one time that we were not allowed to actually go outside and play during recess. So we go outside, we go to the right, and I think it was Miss Caldwell's class. I think it was Miss Caldwell, was my 5th grade teacher. We would turn to the right. You go down, and then like there was the cafeteria and the hallway, and it got dark. But then you make another right, and you run out, and there was this like street, like a little driveway, right? And you make another right, and we run up the driveway, and there was basketball courts, and then like the playground area was over to it. Like you make another right. You know what I mean? There was a lot of rights in this situation. As we're going out, I notice snow falling from the sky in Phoenix, Arizona. And I want to say it was like 89, 90, or 91. I had to have been in the 4th or 5th grade. I'll have to double check the year on it. So this day we weren't able to go outside and play. So they made us go into the cafeteria area where we would eat. And this is the day that I heard the story of the bells in the mountains. That's what I remember the most, right? Is how the priest closed the story. It was an amazing fucking story to me. I don't know if everybody else in the room, but I remember this story. And the way it goes is, there was this church that was being built somewhere here in Arizona, in the surrounding mountains of Phoenix to be exact. And it involved multiple groups of individuals, pretty much the Spanish, the Native Americans, and really whoever else wanted to worship there. Now, this church was built in the mountains because, once again, this is New Spain. The mountains were very rugged. A majority of them were unexplored, and it was built in a mountain range that faced to the south because that's where the troops would come. And if you needed to, have a good viewpoint of the troops when people were coming, keep in mind this church is not supposed to exist. So it needs to be hidden. So they hid it in the mountains, and they hid it at a viewpoint where you can see directly to the south. This church did well. The Jesuit priests are the people who went against orders. Now, they went against orders not knowing that ships were going to crash, and not knowing that the king was going to think that they were stealing from him. That's not what they were doing. The Jesuit priests have denied mining activities for this very reason. So in 1767, this church that was thriving, that went against the rules, but once again, they weren't really doing anything really wrong. They were still finding a way to praise and worship. It just allowed more than one system of beliefs in this location. So the king decides to send his troops to expel the Jesuit priests. This event is known as the Jesuit expulsion of 1767. This church has to shut down immediately. The church consisted of relics that were made of gold, silver, precious stones, and these relics were hidden, including bells. These bells were hidden in peaks. These bells were made of gold and silver and other precious metals. And the way the priest closed the story, and that's why it was so this is why this part is so memorable. I'll never forget what the priest said. He said, if you're standing in the desert, and if you listen on a nice breezy night, you can still hear the church bells in the peaks of the mountains.
The Yard is Arizona's prime destination to find marble, quartzite, quartz, and granite for all your renovation project needs. We sell direct to the public. All of our stone is pictured and put online with prices at theyardaz.com. Stop by to experience our 5-star customer service. We look forward to seeing you.
The date was August 8th, 2015. I didn't notice it at first, but there was an unidentified flying object in 3 different images. 4 days later, the military circled this area over 13 times. We thought it was an intimidation tactic. The following night, we made a discovery that forced us to ask the question.
My name is Justin Perkins. And I'm Josh White. And we ride for Factory Supercross BMX.
Fast forward to 2008. I am doing research on the Skull and Bones. If you're not familiar with the secret society, the Skull and Bones, dig in, do a little research. It's very interesting. So I come across this website called Desert Forum. I think it's Desert Forum USA or Desert Forum. But in 2008, like I said, I'm looking into the Skull and Bones, and I come across this website because there were human remains left in the position of the Skull and Bones. And these human remains, the stories that were behind these human remains were that they were searching for this thing called the Lost Dutchman, or they were using the Peralta Stone maps. Upon learning about the Lost Dutchman and the Peralta Stone maps, which fit another piece of the Skull and Bones story that I was looking into. When I was researching the Skull and Bones, I wasn't necessarily looking into treasure. I was just following the path of the Skull and Bones, which eventually led me to the Superstition Mountains. This is how I find out, and I'm also reminded about the stone crosses that I saw as a kid, right? I forget about the stone crosses, but I don't forget about the story about the bells in the mountains. So on this website, I come across a man by the name of Jim Hatt. And Jim Hatt pretty much gives me an introduction to the Peralta Stone maps, the Lost Dutchman, and then eventually Jesuit mining. When we get into Jesuit mining, that's when he sends me this picture. And in this picture, I realize this is the school and church that my mother took me to. And not only did she take me there, I remember seeing 2 stone crosses in 1987 sitting in a glass case. So then he sends me pictures of the stone crosses. Yup, Mr. Hatt, those are the same stone crosses that I saw as a kid in 1987. And this is how Jim Hatt and I become extremely close. This is how I meet one of the most famous Dutchman hunters, and probably the one person that believes in the authenticity of the Peralta Stone maps in its entirety. This is him. Jim Hatt, once again, I don't want to stray too far off the subject, but Jim Hatt, that's my guy. I miss him dearly, and I am glad that I am able to continue to search. Not only continue to search, but I think I know where the stone maps lead to. He also introduced me to another person by the name of Tom Collenborn. If you don't know who that name is, or if you do know who that name is, you know how serious it has gotten. When I was introduced to Tom Collenborn, I had a conversation with him, the first conversation. Tom Collenborn did not believe in the authenticity of the Peralta Stone maps until I talked to him. And I gave him my interpretation of what I thought they were. I did not know at the time where I thought they led to, but I gave him my interpretation of the landmarks on these maps. A lot of the true Dutchman hunters know that the Peralta Stone maps do not lead anywhere in the Superstition Mountains. Now, if you're searching for the Lost Dutchman, you cannot use the Peralta Stone maps. This is the confusion of the story. If you decide to get into this, we're going to save you a lot of time in about 3 years, 2 to 3 years of research. The Peralta Stone maps will not lead you to the Lost Dutchman. Now, it's possible that they are a location on the Peralta Stone maps. The Peralta Stone maps are something else in its entirety. They were linked together to confuse the outsiders. Now, on this website, this is where I share my story with Mr. Hat. Mr. Hat convinces me to do something that it worked. It worked. I have to be honest, it worked. Because about 2 weeks later, we obtained this photo. Now, this photo may not mean much, but this photo symbolizes 400 years of not acknowledging the mining activities that the Jesuits were doing. They tried to do something that they believed in, and there's a few Jesuit priests out there that we're going to talk about. But this story begins way before them. So sit back, relax, and we're going to really get to the starting point here in just a second. And it goes back to, if you've ever seen the movie National Treasure, Book of Secrets, where they find the city on the wooden plank and they call it Cibola.
I can identify one symbol. Look at this. Do you know what that is?
Sacred calendrical? I don't know.
That symbol is Cibola.
The truth in that movie, especially when Nick Cage is standing there and he's talking about Esteban, and Esteban was shown the city of gold.
It's Cibola.
The city of gold. The city of gold. In 1527, a Spanish ship wrecked on the Florida coast. There were only 4 survivors. One was a slave named Esteban, who saved a local tribe's dying chief. As a reward, he was taken to their sacred city, a city built from solid gold.
There were actually 7 cities of gold. This is mainly the reason why the Spanish amped up their expeditions and came out here, is the 7 cities of gold. Cibola y Quivira. This land, Cibola y Quivira, was on Spanish maps for over 200 years. They were searching for the 7 cities of gold. So when Nicolas Cage is standing there and he's explaining the 7 cities of gold, he begins talking about Esteban or Estebancio. Esteban, yes, was a slave. Esteban or Estebancio. You'll hear me trickle between both of those because that's just how the historical facts are about this character, this individual. This individual is really where it all starts at. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get into that. So, the truth in the movie, to National Treasure, the second one, Book of Secrets, really is about the American Southwest. There were 7 cities. In the movie, they said Mount Rushmore was reshaped to hide the location of the city of gold. This happened in the Superstition Mountains in the 1800s. They refaced some mountains out there. The government did. This is all facts. You can find it everywhere. You can use the FOIA if you'd like to, which is the Freedom of Information Act, and you can find this information yourself. We're going to start the next installment with Estevancio and the 7 Cities of Gold. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.